thank you for coming, Chris. AHEE. You released recently on Gravitas. It was such a fun release. I was so happy to work with you. I loved the artwork that we ended up with. And yeah, man, just great to have you here. Welcome. And thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. It's great to be here. I loved that release. I'm like so impressed with the Gravitas team. Y'all did such a great job, just like the whole process of like the album release and the promotion and just the interactivity of it all and finding the art, which was Germ Life.
Grim Life, yeah, Grim.
Grim Life.
Seth Grimm, yeah, he does a lot of the artwork for Electric Forest. He's an amazing artist. But yeah, it was really fun. And just to speak to that, as a label, we've worked really hard to, we think of two things. We think of our as a business, we think of our fans as customers, but we also think of artists as our customers, as our clients. We want to work really hard. We work really hard to make sure that artists feel taken care of, that they feel part of the family. And that was actually one of my first questions to you. You've released with a number of different labels. You had a long-term relationship with Play Me, which is founded by Reed Speed, an amazing drum and bass artist, DJ that I've respected for years. You just had a release on Sleeveless Records, Dome of Doom. Maybe I'm forgetting some other ones, Moody Music. So you've been all over the place. And I just want to ask you first, what is it like to work with different labels, and what is your approach with that? Sometimes you self-release, sometimes you work with labels. You just kind of get around. And
I get around. A label slut. I guess so at the lunch table, like back in high school, I would always just sit with anybody. Like I sort of had a group of friends that I'd sit with, but I'd always like to meet up with other people and talk with them too. And so I think it sort of just continues on in just how I approach with people, because I like working with a lot of different people and I like seeing how different people work. And, every record label is going to have like a different strategy or what they think is the right way to release music. And, they're also just going to have different levels of experience, and even like the same label will change over time in like their strategies and their experiences and like how involved they are in the actual record release process. But like I've noticed that the more the label is involved, like just the more opportunities that can arise in total just from the whole project itself.
Right on. Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean,
and also
learning from each label as you go and kind of seeing inside of their process, learning the different things that they do to have a successful release. I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? So just to keep talking about what Chris was saying, and I've experienced this as in my business. I work with, I run a web design agency called Lionshare Digital, and we work with a number of different clients. And one of the cool things about that is I get to see inside of each person's business and their process. And so I think that is like something like with Mr. Bill, he collabs with so many people, and I think he kind of is like absorbing their powers one by one. So yeah, I think that's a smart thing. So we'll wait till he gets back on. I think the other thing, Chris, if you're with me here, is he may be getting is he produces a lot of different genres. So that's the same. Yeah. So that's the same kind of thing I see what you doing with labels is you're a very multifaceted producer. So was there a conscious decision, or is it just sort of in your personality of like, hey, I'm going to try and produce a lot of different styles, or you just get excited about a sound and then kind of roll with it and then it develops like that?
Oh, I have ADD or something. I just, I have a hard time sticking to one sound. I'm just inspired by so many things, and then I just go by what I'm inspired by, and I just run with it. I like that idea of like Mr. Bill absorbing all these energies. I feel like for me, it's like I'm playing off of other people's energies. Like I love when I hear someone sound and I get inspired by it. I'm like, oh, I want to make my own version of what they're doing.
Totally. Yeah, so I think that's a great next point is like you'll sort of take a genre or a style or work with someone and you still hold your own sound and sort of synthesize it in your way. Go back, tell me about as you were developing your sound, what that was like kind of finding your own sound and now how that can play out. I know, I'm sure that's a big question.
Okay, so I've gone through so many different phases in my life. Like I started off making like really cheesy like trance music when
Yeah.
I was like 12 and rap music, and I was making rap music about drugs when I was like 12 years old, but I'd never had seen a drug or taken a drug. I just knew that they were bad from like the DARE program. So I'd be like cocaine, and then the beat would go on, and then I'd be like heroin, and the beat would go. I just say these names. I didn't know what they meant.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I started in like this like really dumb
Sure.
part of my life. But from there, I got really influenced by punk and metal music, and I started trying to make that. But man, I sort of sucked at playing guitar. At first, I only played with my thumb, and I'd like strum upward because no one ever taught me anything. I was
Awesome.
like playing harmonics on the guitar, and then at some point, I I heard Aphex Twin when I was like maybe 17 years old, 16, I think. And that just opened up my entire world. Like I was really into double kick drums in bass music or in metal music.
Right.
And so when I heard like the drumming of Aphex Twin, I was just like, oh my God, this is even next level. And
Right.
then from there, it got me into, I made like 48 albums of like IDM stuff in
Wow.
college.
Wow.
And then some after that, I went to a Psytrance festival with Goa Gill, and one of my like college friends took me to, and I hated the music. I was like, electronic music's terrible. I
Yeah.
like Aphex. And then at some other thing, I went to like a techno party
Yeah.
where it was just like, and I was just like, I don't understand. They're just listening to this over and over again. And then, and so I just sort of had like a weird perspective on electronic music. And then it wasn't really until I heard some early dubstep stuff where I was just like, oh, interesting. It's like a different pattern all of a sudden. And then trap music's formed. But even like early dubstep, I was just like, I don't like all the machine noises. Now I love machine noises.
Yeah.
Sort of been exposed to it so much. And then I think in 2012, I started making like electro house. I was like making big room electro house, and it was awful.
So you've been
And
through
then
a lot of chapters. That's
I've
awesome.
been through so many freaking chapters. I was like in this like Grimes indie electronica phase for a while, and then eventually I was just like, screw it, I'm gonna make my own genre. And then that's when I started making this thing I called New Bounce in like 2016. And then after that, I just sort of started, I don't know, taking electronic music more seriously. And I'd been to Lightning in a Bottle several times in the
Right.
City Festival, and I was starting to be exposed to electronic music that I really loved. And those influences just sort of kept on building, and I kept on being more interested and dedicated to getting better and getting a clean sound. And that's sort of like what I'm known for now.
Yeah.
In some circles, they're like, how do you get your music to sound so clean? And I remember Googling like how to make music clean and just not finding anything. It's just
Well, maybe
uh,
you can share some of that with us tonight. And that is cool that you you kind of had one of those moments at Lightning in a Bottle. I definitely have had a couple of those at Do-Lab parties, and I think that they really work hard to do that. So shout out Do-Lab, big love to them, and
Yeah. And that's where we last hung out.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, so you know, I wanted to talk about kind of, I guess one of the other things I know you for is your work ethic and how much you work, not only just putting out your own music, which is, and you know, when gigging was going off, you know, really gigging and touring hard.
Gigging.
Yeah, but the gigging years,
Gig in the sky.
the great gigging.
I remember.
But also making lots of sample packs, and you have another project called Heartworks with your partners. So I mean, talk about that. Talk about what does it look like to balance those things, and how did that kind of build? How did you build those things? And as I guess I think people here would like to know, obviously the technical side of making music, but I think another big question is like, how can you make your creative passion, making music, a career, or make it sustainable where you can live off of it? It is really hard to do, but I think you're a great example of somebody that's kind of put a bunch of the pieces together.
Yeah, well, the pieces came sort of slowly together. I guess I should rewind back to like high school almost again. Like I hated working for other people, and I was like a pizza delivery, and that was like my first like real job was pizza delivering, and I didn't consider it a real job because I got to like listen to music, you know, while driving around.
That's
And
awesome.
so I just always had this mentality of the reason why I work so hard is because I'm actually really lazy. Because I hate doing what other people tell me to do.
Okay.
And I just always want to do what I want to do, and so it never feels like work to me. And so, well, I mean, it is work, but I want to do it instead of someone being like, here, you do this thing.
Yeah.
I just always was like, no, I'm going to do my thing. And then for a while there, I was still working for other people. Like I was a lighting designer for a while. I worked on this crazy invention called the Space Harp, and I was the creative director of this thing. And I did like Max MSP programming, programmed it with Ableton, and so I was just finding like ways that I could apply myself and the things that I knew. Because I remember when I applied to be a lighting designer, I didn't know shit about DMX, but I was like, I know MIDI, I can figure out DMX. And I just said them, sure, yeah, I know DMX. I've seen it before.
Yeah.
And then I worked as a lighting designer at this geodesic dome in downtown LA for a while, back in like 2000 something, 14.
Yeah.
Something. Maybe before that. And then slowly I started being introduced to more creative people. And then I saw Cymatics do sample pack, and I was just like, if they're making money doing this, then we can do this. Like I have so many samples of like, I carried around this portable field recorder for 10 years. So I'm just sort of used to collecting sounds. And so I did that with, I started a company with my college friend, Wiley Cable of Dome of Doom Records. And he's like really good business minded person. And I'm just such a powerhouse in creating shit that like our two things together just sort of worked really well. And we've had like we've always like hustled together since college, so it just sort of worked well together. And then
that's
I guess with Ash,
a good lesson too, right? Of like try to find someone that you could partner with that has complementary skill sets. And I'm sort of often the business side on things and look for creatives and want to empower creatives, and that you know, that's a smart move. It takes both. It takes a team to do things at that point.
Yeah. Also, I feel like I should mention this because I see you do this, is the mentality of always wanting to learn and better yourself. Like I see you going out to conferences and whatnot. That's how sometimes I'll see you in LA.
Yeah.
And for me, like when I'm not making music, I'm trying to learn other things. Like I really like learning history on YouTube, and sciences and astronomy, and uh, yeah, I'm always trying to learn stuff. And so I feel like as a thing that y'all listening to get out of this is to develop a mindset where you're always trying to learn, because in that you'll just naturally gravitate to things, gravitas to things. You'll gravitate to things that will improve your skill sets.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yeah, that learning, that student mind, the beginner mind, childlike curiosity. And the other thing about that is it does attract other people to you. That's an infectious, desirable trait in a partnership. And so when people see that as like, you know, the hustle, the work ethic, you know, you kind of told it as a rejection of authority, but I really see you as like, you have a vision, you know what you want to do. And so being clear on that, I think is, you know, even if it's sort of like came out of something else, I think you learned, you're a self-starter, you know how to sit down and start something. And even if you don't know it, you're not afraid to start. So those are some really great. Yeah. So I think anybody on here, if you're joining the webinar, if you're part of this scene, like that will apply to you. So, well, cool, man. Well, that's kind of the interview, get our feet wet here. I'd love for you to jump in and show us some of your tricks and your tune that you were working on. So thanks.
Yes.
Yep.
So I noticed a lot of people in the comments for the sign up were wanting to go over bass sound design, post-processing on those basses, and then also some mixing drums kind of thing. And then they also wanted to talk about working with labels, and what's my other notes in here? And prevent muddiness in the bass. And there are a couple things about stereo field, how to make things wide, which actually I can tell you the secret to making things wide is making everything else mono.
Nailed it. Cool. Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, cool. So I guess I switch I'm going to switch to this other view. So I'm going to disappear.
Yep.
All right. So y'all can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I guess I can just play some of this track and then we'll sort of talk about some of the bass sound design, because I think some of the sound design is going to be something that everyone here is going to enjoy. Can y'all hear that?
No.
You can't hear that?
No.
All right. How did we fix this earlier?
You shared your computer sound.
Okay, yeah. Computer sound only. Okay,
Yep.
Here we go. Now you can hear it. Okay. So first off, now here in Ableton, I want to show y'all the plugin that everyone here should get. And it is Span, S-P-A-N by Voxango. And if you don't have this, what are you doing with your life? You should know. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, Span is like the best, my most used plugin. It's basically a spectrum analyzer, and I'll show you how I use it here, because I am able to solve so many issues by learning how to use this. And I just want to take note before we dive in. With Span, there's this little cog up here in the top right. You want to click on it and change the block size. It will naturally come at 2048. You want to change it to 4096. That basically increases the resolution. Write that down. Take the time to write that down. I have a whole YouTube video on it as well, but I can't stress out about how useful that is. Okay, let's listen to the track and watch it. so that's the drop. And let's sort of talk about that bass sound, because I'm sure that's what most people want to learn about. It's this sound right here. So here's the original unfreeze, the original serum patch for this thing. Let me turn off the post-processing here inside.
And just sorry to interrupt, but we know that the screen isn't like great resolution. This just seems to be a limitation with Zoom right now. So that because of all of the other streams happening. So just we'll do the best we can with it.
Yeah, sorry about that, y'all. But so here in Serum, this sound is made by just 2 sine waves, and they're FM synthesis. And I have a whole video on YouTube also called How to Make the Perfect Wub, but I'll go over it really quickly here. So basically, analog basic shapes is how you get the pure sine wave. And then down here, you can select all these different warp modes. And this one is FM from B. So we're FM synthesizing from this oscillator to this one. And I've turned the level down. I've turned it all the way down on this one, so we're not even hearing it. And I've placed them an octave apart, or 2 octaves apart. So this one's -1, this one's +1. So they're essentially just 2 octaves apart. And one's being FM'd. And now this is the part that I think I struggled on when I was first learning FM synthesis, is that I would crank the FM up all the way. And you really don't want to do that. You want to treat your FM, at least for this kind of sound, more subtly. And so I've got it like, I've got an LFO, which I've dragged over here to the FM. And this FM's at 21% and it's going up 27. And it's following the shape. And this LFO I've set to trigger mode, which is looping. I guess I could have it on envelope. It doesn't really matter, but, and you can play around with how fast it goes. And so through a combination of adjusting LFOs and applying them to different things in here, you can get these really, really awesome sounds by really simple processing. I saw some people also wondering how to get more movement out of their basses. And I would say try to make your LFOs more creative. Like in this instance, like it's like usually the LFO would be shaped like this triangle. Oops. So this is like how it's standard, how it looks standard. And so just trying to create a more interesting shape in here, I feel like helps that. Or, you know, you can. But also sometimes having a simpler shape that just has these nice curves to it, I think helps a lot. The other thing that in here, I'm going to skip ahead to this other sound. Where is it? Is it this one? Yeah, this one right here. This sound is done with the same process, where it's just these 2 sine waves, and it's being FM from B. This time they're 3 octaves apart. So playing around with the octaves of the sine waves, I think, is really cool. Here you can see that each wub, instead of the LFO just having a single LFO that's like the same shape for every wub, this one, each wub has its own unique shape. And yeah, you can get so much more character and depth to your sounds by just allowing each individual wub to be a slightly different shape. And so these are controlling the FM amount and the volume and something else. I don't know what else. What else is it controlling? Oh, the volume of the noise on here. I think that was the original sound, but I turned it off for this. And so it's getting this like cool pitch bend shape as well. And it's this really simple triangle. So I'm not pitch bending at the beginning, and then I start going up and down. You'll hear what, up. And how I got this to control the volume, a lot of the times people will just drag them here to the coarse pitch, and that's okay, but you'd have to do it to both and make sure it's all lined up perfectly. An easier way to do it is just to go into the matrix here and select your LFO2, and then go to global and master tune, and then make sure the type is selected. There's this two-way arrow that goes both left and right, and that's called a bipolar. So that means it can go below and above the initial 0 point. But I don't want that. I want it to be unipolar, so that way it only goes one direction, which is above in this case. So normally this little slider would be set to 0, so I have it set to, what was it, like 6 or something? No, it was a little bit higher. Forgot what it was. 12 sounds good. So you can see that it's going up in pitch here and then back down again. Does that make sense, or did I go too fast?
We got some yeses. I mean, your screen is a little pixelated for us. I think that there's a nice, or at least it is for me, that I think you're showing a very simple process of or not very simple, but a simple process of FM synthesis and how to be creative with your LFOs and using some of the other parameters to give movement. So, I mean, if you were going to boil that down, you'd say, kind of start with a simple sound and then apply the LFOs to give yourself the modulation that you're looking for.
Yeah, starting simple is such a big thing, because what I notice is, like, here, I'll make it sound bad real quick. I'll just turn up the FM amount all the way. Terrible.
Right.
Even I'll turn it up even a there's like a sweet spot in there that is usually dialed back a little bit.
Being tasteful, not trying to go max out everything, or clip it to the max, sort of.
And that was my problem when I first started playing with FM synthesis, is that I would get this distortion and uncleanliness in there. I didn't even realize it was in there until later on, when I learned from other people just how to dial it back a little bit.
Nice.
I guess another thing in here is you can chain the carrier. So in FM synthesis, it always requires 2 oscillators. There's the carrier, which is this oscillator A, and then the modulator, which is what you're FMing from, which is the oscillator B. So right now it's super clean with those, but we could maybe go to spectral and choose some of these monster ones, which I really like, which are a little bit messier. Go through here and you can get some interesting sounds that way too. You can hear that starts introducing overtones. And you can get very different characters to the same process. So I would say start with a really simple process with sine waves. Try to keep the carrier clean, or the carrier clean, and then you can get a little bit more complex with the modulator. Now, another thing here is the post-processing. I use this thing called the Magic Box, which is part of my Magic Ableton racks, and it's essentially OTT, which I can go over, and then a upwards compression, downwards compression, and a glue compressor. So it's like these 4 different types of compression that just sort of help bring out the sound. And OTT is really the main component of it. The OTT stands for over the top compression. And it basically, how do I say this? It is compressing 3 different bands, the top band, the highs, mids, and lows, and you can control like how much compression is going through there. But honestly, just the OTT like preset like settings inside Ableton, I've seen almost, so I went to these things called EDM school, which were some classes, and I got to learn from Virtual Riot and Getter, and like Brills before he was LS Dream. And I just got to see like what their processes were for making music, and all of them used OTT like religiously, like on almost everything. And if they didn't have, they had, didn't, if one OTT wasn't good, they'd throw another one on there. In Getter's case. But I've sort of, after playing around with OTT for a long time, I've sort of found this more subtler way of using it. Here, so OTT is part of the Ableton multiband dynamics. It's a preset in there. Looks like this. And to describe this just in the simplest terms, I ignore everything on this except for these 3 bands on the side. I've played around with all these things, but when I make music personally, I only use these 3 knobs on the side. One of them, the output, is volume. Usually I turn it up. Time, it's like if you turn it to the right, it makes it punchier. If you turn it to the left, it makes the sound squishier. And then the amount is like the dry wet in a way of it. It's not a pure dry wet. To demonstrate this, let me grab an amen break. And this will be super apparent of like what this thing does. And also why you should learn how to use this thing. Look at all these amens. There we go. So here's an almond break. Let me know. So now we're going to apply the OTT to it. It squishes the heck out of it, and you can ruin sounds with the OTT super easily. And so I've sort of developed this technique of using it a little bit more subtly, where I will actually boost the volume of it a lot. And then I'll play around with this time amount, and you'll be able to see why it's punchier to the right and squishier to the left. And so with that in mind, you can then use the amount to dry wet it, to dry wet the effect in there. And so like with these drums, I want them to be punchy and loud. So I'm going to turn up the output, and I'm going to have the time mostly to the right. And then I'm just going to slowly turn up the amount until it sounds clean, yet punchy. Yeah, that to me helped those drums out so much. And so with the Magic Racks, I just sort of have all these specific settings in there that just work really well on a lot of different things. So a lot of production is also being able to do things really fast, in order to like get your idea out of your brain and onto the Ableton plane of existence. Does that make sense about the OTT? Does anyone have questions about OTT? Yeah, I put that on a drum rack. Yeah, I put OTT on a lot of different things. Left extends the tail. Yeah, squishier. X for OTT replicates Ableton. Yeah, X for OTT is cool too. I don't ever use it though. I got the Ableton one. It's great. Are you down with OTT? Yeah, you know AHEE. I like that comment. Yeah. I guess I can talk about more stuff in here. I did just release a tutorial today about sub bass and how to balance that stuff. So like you'll notice here, I try to render out my bass samples a lot because I like to be able to chop them up afterward. I think you can get a lot more creative with the audio rather than just playing with the MIDI. And that's something I notice a lot, like getting to watch the Skrillex, like the Skrillex, what was it? The live stream that he did somewhat recently, you know, and just seeing how much he really plays around with audio is something I've also really liked a lot as well. So here in the audio, I've got this. I guess we can talk a little bit about how to remove mud, but you can see this thing on here where I'm boosting this sub by like what 11.7 dB on here, which mixing school would tell you to never do that. They'd be like, that's a terrible idea, but it makes it sound better. So I'm doing it. Here, I'll play you the sound with and without it. And we'll look here in span on just this wub. So we can see here that the height of this wub here, the sub bass portion of it. So sub bass is basically anything below 100-ish hertz. And this -30 line here in span is sort of like the main line that you want to monitor everything off of. Just, it's really useful to watch other tracks through span. Like I'll spend entire studio sessions just looking at tracks through span. Thusly why it's my favorite monitoring plugin, and my favorite plugin in general is that you get an idea of where your favorite artist's tracks are sitting volume-wise and frequency-wise. And so you get after developing this and watching tons and tons of tracks, you get a sense, an internal sense of like what the song is supposed to look like to be able to be at certain levels. And so I know that this -30 line is you want your I want my sub basses to be just a little bit over it, in between the -30 and this -24. And this is obviously below 30. So I'm just going to find that exact frequency, which is a D sharp. And then I use this thing called the frequency chart. Where'd it go? Where's my frequency chart? Here it is. Can you see this chart?
Yes, we can see it.
All right. So I also just put this up on my Gumroad for free download, which I guess we'll provide a link to that.
Yeah, we'll send out an email with a recap and all of that stuff at the end.
All right. Yeah. So I have a free download of this chart. So it's got all these different notes on here, and then it's got the corresponding frequencies for those notes. And so this low D sharp in the sub bass frequencies is 38.9 hertz. So I'll go over here to the EQ, and I'll just type in here 38.9. Boom. And it's on that exact frequency. I'll turn up the Q all the way. Let me turn that. And I'll just turn up the gain on that specific frequency until it reaches the desired level. And now you can also do the opposite. Now, say if there was a note in your sub bass that's too loud, you can figure out what that note is. Here in span, you can also sort of glide through, and you'll see in the top left-hand corner, it displays the frequency and also the note number and also the amount of cents. And it's a little bit hard to read sometimes, but you can sort of guesstimate, and you can see here that this note is about at a D sharp. And then also I could see in the actual key here that it was a D sharp. But also here, there's this frequency here that's a little too loud. And that one is a G. It's like this. Yeah, it's a G. So I typed in 193 hertz. So I'd come back to the EQ on this, and I'd type in 193. Turn up the Q all the way, and then just bring that frequency down. And I do this all the time on like so many different things. And there's actually a plugin that sort of does it for you. At least it can do the negative resonant EQing. It's called Soothe by Oak Sound, OEK Sound. And it's called Soothe. And they have a version called Soothe too. And, but honestly, it's like, it takes up a lot of CPU power, and I just find this technique that I just showed y'all a little bit more accurate, while the other one actually does work if there's like tons of issues like in your high frequencies. Like you see here, you see these higher frequencies up here. Well, actually, let's find a more complex sound. I don't know if there are super complex sounds in this song. I guess that's this one. Yeah. So you see how there's like all these spikes up here? Soothe could actually duck each individual one and like monitor and move it, which is pretty useful. But also like if like any sound goes off the chart, I usually try to figure out what's frequency that is. Like this really high one right here, this is 939 hertz. Yeah, so I would maybe, I think it's okay where it's at in this song, but if it started getting up higher, I might try to turn that specific frequency down. Now to clear out mud from tracks, it's really important to EQ everything that isn't supposed to be in the sub-bass frequencies. Like every single one of my groups and elements is EQ'd out below 100 hertz. If the sound doesn't, so how there's limitations to the actual physical speakers that we're playing electronic music on. And like, I feel like sometimes people forget that our instrument is the speaker cone. And so what will happen is, let me tell you a little bit about the physics of speaker cones. This is my rant on sub-bass phase cancellation, by the way. So I think this will help you all out a lot. When I started thinking about it this way, it really helped. So when a speaker cone moves, imagine this sine wave here. When it's going up like this, that's the speaker being pushed outward. And then when it's going down like this, that's the speaker cone going backwards, like into the speaker. So say there's an instance in which you ask the speaker to go in two different directions at once. So say I flip the phase, let me flip this. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So say I'm playing these two at the same time. Now I'm asking the speaker to go forwards and backwards at the same time. The speakers can't physically be in two places at once. So it's going to do the mathematical difference and go nowhere. And that's, sometimes you'll create sub-bass phase cancellation in that sense, where your sub-bass will completely disappear or it will be amplified a lot. Just all sorts of weird things can happen. And so by EQing out everything below 100 hertz with the EQ, usually I use just the EQ8, and I set it to this 4 times notch. So that way, like usually the EQ is like at this smoother curve, and I just sort of like the sharper curve a little bit more. It cuts out more of the sound, and I just get rid of everything below 100 hertz except for the sub bass and the kick. And then the kick and the sub bass are being sidechained to each other, so only one of them is occurring at a time. So that way the sub speaker really has the full momentum to be able to go forwards and backwards without any mathematical hiccups that you may be asking the speaker to do without you even realizing it. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if any of you guys ever done, live sound or worked at a festival, they'll have to they have the speaker arrays in front of the stage. They actually have to time those speakers, and based on the timing of the signals that they send to those speakers, you get different patterns out in the crowd. So they're trying to time them so that you don't end up with dead spots out in there. And you sometimes you can hear a dead spot. You'll be somewhere and be like, I can't hear it. Then you move 10 feet to the left, and it's great. So that's phase cancellation happening real time in the live environment. So yeah, it's important to understand what you're doing and the physical properties of sound so that you can make, good quality sounds. Yeah, I mean, I think EQing out everything under 100 is pretty widely known. Thanks for sharing that. I loved everything you talked about. Span seems really good. Somebody asked, why not use Ableton's Spectrum? And
I can tell you, because it sucks. That's my professional answer. Okay. Here, let's look at it. Spectrum here in Ableton, let's look at the track, see how much information you can get out of it.
Right. Even when you pop it up big with the arrow.
Yeah. I can't see, and also you can see that it's moving in the numbers and everything. It's not as detailed.
Right on.
Compared to this.
Right.
And also Voxango Span is for free. It's a free download, so there's no reason why not to.
One question I thought of, more or less on the technical side, but more on the arrangement. I think one of the things I really like about this tune is just it's fairly straightforward. You got a really nice sound going, a really nice loop, and then you're really sprinkling in some fun sounds here and there. That's one of the things I really like about Opio's music. It's pretty simple. There's not a ton of sounds happening at once. Do you try to use that to your advantage? Is that something you've learned over the years, and kind of back off and not filling up the spectrum with a million different sounds?
Yeah. Anyone here, has anyone listened to EPROM's The Cat? Because that song is so fucking simple. It's crazy. It's just like one wub, and then like a snare will happen, and then some other noise will happen. But like, it's so effective because it allows the speaker to be really focused. And this is a huge evolution of my sound, has become simpler and simpler and more refined sounds. I easily have made so many songs that are too complex, because I love complexity. But I even realized from studying the people that I love that the complexity is generally horizontal complexity rather than vertical complexity. And what I mean by that is the complexity of the song comes from the play through time rather than stacking tons of sounds on top of each other.
Right.
And so like, here's the second drop. Like, there's really only one or two sounds happening at any given time. You can sort of see it here in my arrangement. There's like, the kick and snares are sort of the repeating faction, but like here there's like bass element completely disappears, then another bass element, then completely disappears, then another one, you know, so each one's got its own spotlight to shine. And then like if I do layer sounds there to complement each other and blend into one sound, so like this bass line is going along with this reversed koto sound. Oh, I should actually maybe talk about this. This is one of my favorite new techniques is, let's see if the original sound of this sounds like this. Oops, sorry. How'd that get in there? So that's the original sound. So what I did is I reversed it. I love reversing samples. And then here in Ableton, when you have the warp modes, I like setting it to complex pro mode. And then you can hit this 2 times button down here and it stretches it out twice as long. You can also hit the divide button and it divides it. And then, so in here, it stretches it out. So I think I switched this to beats mode again, and then had the 2 forward arrows. And so it's like trying to stretch the sample out, but it's failing. And so it has to like insert the same audio to fill in that same amount of space. And so that's what's creating those little glitches. It's sort of like, it's a granular synthesis sort of thing in a way. But also here in Ableton, there's like more straight granular synthesis with the texture mode. And you can see the grain size here, and you get some really totally. And like if you keep on stretching these out, you can get some really cool sounds that way. I like doing vocals that way. You can get some really cool things with vocals. Where's here. This has some vocals in it. Well, that was noisy and there we go. So if I just keep on timesing it so that way it keeps stretching out, and I'm going to put on texture. And now I'm G Jones, yo. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and so here's another trick. Unfortunately, Ableton cannot, you can't automate the grain size in here. And so a trick is to create a new audio channel, and then instead of external in, like have the in come from another channel. So we're gonna have it from Vox 1. And then so I'm gonna record this, and it will record that glitched audio there. And then you could go through and chop that audio up later. But yeah, I love doing that, being able to create elements that you're going to use later, like have entire sound design sessions where you're just creating weird shit, and then you create like your own sample pack in a way for yourself to use in your own songs. And that's how I actually treat making sample packs too, is that I'm just making a ton of stuff for my own songs. So it's not work. It's just me being creative. And then later on, I go through and chop all that stuff up and find the most useful stuff. And then I'll create that and sell that as a sample pack, yet also use it in my own songs.
Smart. Yeah. Very cool.
A lot of like how to make a living off of music is just finding ways to monetize the things you're already doing. Yeah. And like, so how am I making money? I'm making money through samples, and through doing tutorials, and selling the Ableton racks. And I was making money off of touring, but honestly, my tour money was nothing compared to the other things. Like, I mean, I was supposed to this year, whatever.
Yeah, let's not go there. That's a sad time. Let's keep it up. Ninja is asking, can you take us through your post processing for your bass and chords?
Oh yeah. Mute those things. So these chords, what's the post processing on this? Nothing, except for cutting out the low end. And what about this one? Yeah, I added in this fat rack. So this, I think this is just a plain saw wave. So this sound here in Serum. Yeah, so it's got some distortion on it. Barely does anything, but it's really this phaser sound that's sort of adding some unique character to it. But you can see I've got a sub bass that's going directly out, and now I've got this plain saw wave. I guess it's at unison 7, so it is creating some noise. So this is a big thing. When creating sounds that have a lot of unison to them, it's very easy for them to go out of phase and make them sound weird. And so I generally like to have a dedicated sub that is just a pure sine tone. That is my sub bass. That's also a G Jones thing. I saw him comment like almost all of his basses are just pure sine waves. And then it's all about layering on top of that and getting them to bend together. No, I don't compress my subs really at all, though it gives a sense of compression, because this is also a weird thing that I do. All my groups, I sell this thing called the Magic Templates, where it's just my template. But my templates are weird because they're based off of what Skrillex does, where he puts limiters on every single one of his groups. So in the process of making the song, I'm making my songs at a mastered level. So I actually don't ever send my stuff off to a mastering engineer. Sometimes I will, and I'll bring down the volume here on the master, but like a lot of what gets my track so loud and clean is the fact that I have limiters on all of my groups, and that I treat my groups sort of like how the Beatles treated their groups, where like I imagine each one of my groups as like a musician in my band. And like, so I have my bass player, like my drummer and vocalist and keyboard or guitar player or whatever. Here, so I got the chords, bass, kick and snare. I process the kick and snare and the top drums differently in a lot of tracks, but not in this track. And then a whole effects section, and then I have this pre-master in which the bass and the drum and the kick and snare are going to this. So it's basically, the reason why I'm doing this is I'm creating layers of compression and limiting, so that way the master limiter doesn't have to do as much work. At the end, it's like the master limiter, say if you had like a really loud sub bass, this used to happen to my songs, where before I started doing this technique, I would always be trying to turn up my sub bass to be able to hear it on my home speakers. And then when I limited it, the sub bass would hit the limiter first, but I didn't know that. And so every time the bass hit, all the rest of the sounds would become quieter. And yeah, doing this technique prevents that from happening. So let's see, what are the limiters hitting in this track? Here on the bass. This was barely hitting. This track is not very loud, honestly. Let's look at the kick and snare. Yeah, so the snare is actually being tamed a lot. Let's listen to this pre-master channel. How much is this? Yeah, it's just to tame these like transients and things, so that way everything can be sort of at a more even level. This track is pretty quiet, honestly, compared to my other tracks, and I've still got a lot of mixing to do on this one. I just made this like a couple days ago, but I thought it was pretty fun to demonstrate. Yeah, EEPROM does almost nothing on his master chain. Yeah, it's all the individual sounds and the groups that you process. Yeah. So here on my master, all I've got is Pro L. Let's see, how much is this? I guess it's doing 3 dB of gain. Yeah. I guess it spikes up to that between -6 and -8 worth of dB. But yeah, usually I think I'd get all the other tracks a little bit louder, but usually I don't even pull down on them at all. I just leave them as they are, and then I just turn up the actual track volume until I like how they're all sitting and how they're reacting to their individual limiters on the groups. Now that was a long ass tangent to get into bass processing, but I'm gonna go back to this bass. Sorry, I'm jumping around. This is how my brain works, I guess.
That's fine, dude. We're all like that, man. It's good stuff. Thank you, buddy.
Oh wait, someone has a question. I see that you have a pre-master bus where the kick and bass snare, then the chords go to the main master. Yes, I guess I should explain that first. So yeah, so I've got the kick, snare, and bass going to a pre-master, and everything else is going to the master. In my templates, I have a couple different routing setups, and so there's like 3 different routing setups. This is the one I happen to use the most. Skrillex's is slightly different, and so I made that option available as well. But it essentially allows it allows some elements in your mix to be heavily compressed and other elements in your mix to be more dynamic. And that's what always tripped me about Skrillex's music. You might not like it. I happen to like it. That's why I'm talking about it. But you can't deny that the guy is like a brilliant, like sound engineer. Like his stuff is so clean. And then when it is dirty, it's like intentional. And I was always tripped out because his mixes were so loud, but still retained a lot of dynamics. And it took me years to figure out. I eventually talked with people that worked with him, made tracks with him, and they're like, yeah, this is what he does. And then when he finally posted that YouTube video, at the end of last year, of the Fuji opener where he showed his Ableton project, I knew what to look for. And so I made this whole video sort of dissecting his Ableton project. And what I found was that, yes, he was using this multiple like layers of limiting. So it allows the melodic elements and the vocals and things like that to not be compressed as much, but the heavy elements like the drums and the bass to have more compression or limiting. Yeah. Okay, we're finally gonna get to this bass processing. So here's this sound. I just put this fat rack on here. I just make all these things so it's OTT, some distortion, and some saturation. I sort of based it off of the sausage fattener, but it's basically a combination of distortion and compression that I don't know, it just sounds, it helps beef up the sound. And then And then, yeah, I'm boosting the sub bass on here. To get that up to that -30 line. It's going up above that a little bit. So here on this, which sound is this one right here? Yeah. Yeah, so this sound, I really like using erosion. I don't know if y'all have messed around with erosion much, but this thing's so fun. You can get some really cool sounds. It just adds texture, so that it's got this sine frequency, and it adds, I actually don't understand how this works, but supposedly adding a sine wave in there, but it just makes things sound really cool. Let me get a cleaner sound real quick. Let me go back to that original one. Yeah, this one right here. And then here I'll add in the erosion. And so you can get all these like flavors and textures by taking a simple sound and then like adding this, and then this other one, wide noise, it basically just adds noise to you there, but combination together, you can get some really cool sounds. And then I add the magic box to like glue it all together, which is that OTT and a couple other compressors. And then I have all these other ones. One of the effects racks I've been really getting into is this that I made called Bird Sign Distortion. So here it is without it. Here it is with it. Actually, that sounds a little weird. Oh, it's because I have this phasing thing flipped. Yeah. So we'll just put it on this sine wave. Here, I'll turn off the FM amount and we'll just listen to the sine wave. So it's just that low sub, and we'll turn on the. And so what this thing is, what is this thing? So it's a high-low splitter. What's going on in here? So it's a frequency shifter, crazy. And so, yeah, so I basically, a lot of the times what I like to do, instead of affecting the entire signal chain, I actually like to split up my effects, and I use this thing called the high-low splitter that I made that's in the Magic Racks, but you can easily remake it yourself by basically having an EQ that only listens to the sub frequencies, which I have it at 143 hertz and below, and then this one's only listening to 143 hertz and above. So that way they're effectively splitting the sound into a high and low channel, and then I'm only affecting the high channel, but I'm affecting the high channel before the EQ, so that way I'm affecting that sub bass. And the reason why I do this, so yeah, is because I want that really pure sine tone, the sub bass in there, to still be the sub bass, but then add something on top. And so it's reacting to the sub bass fundamental because that's the only sound in there. Like if I was to put this after the EQ, I think, yeah, we get nothing because there's no frequencies. It's just a sine tone below 143. So after, okay, so yeah, this is what the frequency shifter is doing. I guess it's on a square thing, and so you can sort of see that it's jumping back and forth between these two frequencies just really fast, and so it's adding this noise. And then I added in the sine wave erosion, And so it's only affecting those top frequencies. And so it just, for some reason, does that. I honestly have no idea why it does that. I wish I could say. But experimenting with Ableton and the flow of the signal chain, I think is just really useful. Like just get two different things in Ableton and see like how they react when you do one specific thing before and after, and like switch their places. And that's how I made all these racks, was just through really specific experimenting, where I'm not experimenting with a ton of things all at once, but only two things at once, maybe a third thing in there, you know. So that way it's that way I can wrap my brain around the signal path and what something is specifically doing. Does that make sense?
I think so, man. Well, thank you so much for all of this. I think we wanted to do, I guess we've got one more question here in the Q&A. Can you please explain the difference between upward compression and downward compression?
Yeah. So let's see here. Upwards compression. So downwards compression is essentially regular compression. Okay, so I'm explaining compression now. Let's go back to that almond break. That's going to be useful. Show me yourself. Show yourself, almond break. Where did you go? I think I accidentally put it here in the bay. Here it is. Okay, great. So downwards compression is essentially once you have a volume of something past a threshold, it is going to turn down that volume by this ratio amount, and it's going to react to it at the speed of this attack and then make it disappear at the speed of this release. That's compression in a nutshell. I like to use this visualization of it, and we'll start to see. I'm going to bring down the threshold so it's not reacting to the compressor yet. Now it's starting to react. And you can see it's making these little dips. So I'm actually going to boost the volume up in this, and we'll actually render to new audio, and we'll physically see the differences. So oh, oops, I got this makeup gain here. So this top one right here has no compression. This bottom one does. And you know what? I think I'm going to up the, that ratio is not very visible. I'm going to turn it up all the way. So here, now you can see with that higher ratio, it basically, anytime a sound goes above the threshold, it just squishes it down. You can see the volume differences are way less between this tail and the initial attack. And so that's downwards compression. Upwards compression does the opposite. So whenever it basically takes these sounds here, and these regular compressors can't do it. The only compressor that I've actually seen that can do upwards compression is the OTT, or the multiband dynamics. And it will actually make these tails louder every time when they're below a certain threshold. So that's the difference. It's basically, and also transient shaping is this way too. It's basically controlling the volume of the initial attack of the sound versus the tail of the sound. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's listen to a couple tunes. If we've got any final questions, we'll take those. But good job, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
A wealth of knowledge, my friend. I can tell you've worked hard to learn the things you've learned and really put in the time, and thank you for sharing them.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I guess something I sort of want to address that I saw a lot of people question was how to contact labels. Maybe we can cover that real quickly.
Yeah.
So when I first was starting to reach out to labels, I actually had someone make a contact for me at Play Me Records. I think that was like my first like bigger label. And how he went about making the contact was that he would interact with like the label owners like social media and just sort of try to develop a digital relationship, so that way when they reached out to them, it wasn't like a rando person reaching out to them. It was like, oh, I've seen that name, I'll consider giving this a look. And then they listen to it and they happen to like it because, you know, I pitched something to them that I knew that they would like. It's like, I wouldn't pitch like, you know, you don't pitch house music to a drum and bass label. Well, maybe with Play Me, because they do everything.
Yeah.
But you know, the general rules apply. You know, you're not going to pitch metal music to electronic music label unless something unique there. But it's really about developing familiarity with people, interacting with their content, and then finding just like the right time to be able to reach out. And when you reach out, have something that you really think that they will really enjoy. Yeah, sum it up: social currency, clout. I
mean,
hate that.
I would definitely jump in here. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. As a label owner, as someone who has put in time and money and effort to help artists release their music, financially it's difficult to make money releasing music. Streams and all of that are challenging. So a couple of pieces of advice: do start with your self-releasing, understand what it looks like to release music, go through that process, develop your own brand, develop your own socials, work on your SoundCloud, work on your Bandcamp, like do your research, get an artist.spotify.com account, look at your, you know, get yourself set up and understand what's happening, at least at a fundamental level of what it looks like to work with a distributor to put some music out. So by doing that, you have a frame of reference of what maybe to some extent a label owner or a label has to do, and then show up and do the work and listen. If they say, hey, we're not loving this artwork, or this, you know, this needs to go back to mastering, or we need to go do some mixing, listen and really, you know, work with them, because they're investing in you, they're investing in your project, and it really should be a partnership. I mean, I've heard some deals and I've seen some things of labels doing some pretty sharky stuff to people. So protect yourself, don't give away the farm, but at the same time, you know, recognize that somebody's kind of making an effort on your behalf, even if you're, you know, maybe not going to make money on the release even at all. They're still putting, you know, they've got their community, they've got their brand, and they're putting that out there for you. So that how to reach out to them, what Chris said is amazing advice. So we'll get demos of hip hop and metal and just the most crazy
Really?
stuff. Yes, all the time, constantly through Label Engine and Submit Hub. And we really made a commitment to try to listen to every demo that we get and respond, because I know how hard and sad it is to send out your music and not get some type of response. At the same time, I now understand more than ever why labels just don't get back to people.
You're torturing yourself.
Yeah, but you know, that's part of the game. So what Chris said is interact with the label's social media. I can say a great example of that is Knock Knock. He's been really working hard to evolve his sound, putting in the time, showing up in Gravitas Create, commenting, being helpful, retweeting, posting on, you know, leaving comments on Instagram and things like that. And it matters.
Labels will notice when you like share their content.
Yeah.
Cause like they're looking like, is anyone listening?
Yeah. Yeah, it's we're all kind of feeling that social media. So by sharing something, retweeting, posting, if you like that label's music, putting that on Twitter or on Instagram or talking about it and mentioning them, people will pay attention. So that's a great. And so it's the rule in all of networking and relationship is give before you get.
Yeah.
You really help, offer to do something of value for someone else and show up and help them and be supportive before you ask. So when someone hits me up on Facebook Messenger and the first thing they do is drop a link, that's like a negative 50 point on their scale, because it shows a lack of maturity, a lack of understanding of networking, and a bunch of things. So if you introduce yourself and say, "Hey, man, I'm so and so. I really like your label. I listened to your podcast. It was really cool." Ask some questions. I'm not saying you don't have to kiss someone's ass, but let them know that you know who they are and what they're doing in a cool way, and don't just go for the ask right away. Develop that relationship. So that's fantastic advice with anything. that
Yeah.
that goes for collaborations, that goes for working in any job or industry. Develop the relationship. Don't ask for something too soon. Really kind of let it develop naturally, and be mature. Understand that everyone is busy, everyone is stressed about making a living, building their brand, doing their thing. So if you contribute to that, that's going to go a long way.
Yeah. Unsolicited the unsolicited like track link is sort of like the cat calling of like
Yep.
music. It's like,
Yeah.
hey mama,
Yeah, it really is.
listen to my track.
It's straight up. It's disrespectful, and it doesn't bode well. It's like, yo, bro, check out my SoundCloud. Is just, we all laugh because we know that's not. But we all do this in some way, shape, or form. Like if
I have done it.
yeah,
I was an idiot for several years because I didn't know, and it wasn't until I was realizing no one's listening to this, or like, I wasn't getting the responses that I liked, that I realized I had to shift my mentality.
yeah.
And that's another thing, is like, be really open to being wrong, and like wanting to like know how to do things better.
Yeah, if after a while, if you try something one way and it doesn't work, try doing it a different way. An example of that for myself in the recent weeks, months, is backing off some of the complex language and putting too much information in emails, and trying to really go simple and more conversational in any emails, marketing emails, or whatever that we send out, and just saying, you know what, let's try it this way and see how it works and see how that feels. So yeah, definitely trying things, being open to being wrong, and seeing, like, taking really honest feedback. If you don't get the reaction you're looking for, look within, rather than blaming or being like, well, these people suck because they didn't listen to my thing. Another thing is, we've got some great information. If you guys haven't been following this on Gravitas Create, Kaylin Gray is our PR person
She kills it.
for both Pivotal. She does for both Pivotal and Gravitas, and she's really, that's a fantastic example of someone who reached out to us, said, "Hey, I'm in school. I'd love to help you. I'm looking to learn. Like, let me know what I can do." And as someone who runs a business, I love that question, but at the same time, I have to go and find that thing for them to do. Then I have to sort of train them and get them set up. So that's a big, if you can't just say, how can I help you? The best thing is, like, if maybe I could help you like X, Y, and Z. I already know how to do these types of things. So she's written some information on Gravitas Create on our blog, The Art of Outreach. And there's 3 different blogs about how to find contacts, how to reach, how to pitch. And so there's definitely a ton of really good information about that on there. And we'll drop some links there. So yeah, so let's listen to a couple tunes, and then my dinner is ready, and we're gonna be done here in about 10 minutes. So
Okay, cool. Let me grab these 2 things. I don't know. I got one of the tunes, but I didn't get the second tune. I emailed one of the people, but they never sent me the tune.
Got it.
But I can play it off SoundCloud. I think it will work. Let me look for those links.
I can send them to you in the chat. 1 second.
Okay.
If you want, is that going to help or not? Because
no, I got the link here.
Okay.
I'm good.
You emailed them to me as well.
Yeah. Also here while I'm setting this up, I have another interview tomorrow with Megan Hamilton.
Definitely. The Green Room podcast. Megan's amazing. I think that's another example of someone who is like, she can make a bunch of different genres. She's not afraid to like just get out there and try and put, be this thing that night and another thing. Yeah. So, and her podcast is a lot of fun.
Cool.
She is, I think, a real deal rock star.
All right. Let's share this. Cool. So I'm going to listen first to Tangled Branches, Inner Sight. Can y'all hear it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And we're going to look at it through Span. So you can see, can y'all hear me over it? So you can see this track hasn't been mastered yet. It's not fully reaching that -30 line. And like, I really like this groove, but I think this is like one of those things where sample selection could have improved this song a lot. Like the kick and the snare are like barely there. I just feel like a better selection of drum samples would just make this track, it would be more punchy and groovier. Well, the groove is actually really good on this. That's what I like about it. And I like the simplicity of the lines together. But still, it's like, overall, they could use more compression. And here, the sub basses are way too loud. Look at that going way up there. Like this bass, it's going to sound really weird live, this track. Like, I would almost try to EQ out this thing by just low passing the sub bass, so that way you're just getting that sub bass in there. Yeah, because the speaker's going to fight with those two frequencies the way that they were. This is the part I like the most. You can't see me dancing right now, but I'm definitely dancing like a robot. Like the melody's so simple. And those little bubbles. And then it just goes into this other. I really like this. But like, the drum samples could be better, and they could be glued together better with like that magic rack, or just like glue compressor, and just like all the samples, like it just all of it could just be glued together just to beef up the entire song. The groove is so good. And also you have to be careful with those high pitched triangle sounds up here. That's the track. That's the first track.
So you would say really it's a matter of some sample selection and some grouping and some post-processing of the sounds and some maybe a little bit more of a mix down.
Yeah, which like a lot of people, like all the mix down stuff that I talk about in the post-processing, that's all super nerdy shit, Like a lot of people are not at that point, and so they just don't know that that's what their song needs. And so it's like with music production nowadays, I feel like it's really important to learn the engineering side of things. I think it's going to make your song so much better. And like, that's the kind of, that stuff takes time to learn. But like that, the information is out there online. I post a lot of it. There's a bunch of other channels that post about it too. But yeah, learning how to be more of an engineer and balancing that with being a creative writer.
It's what it sounds like when, because you've acquired this knowledge, you're kind of doing it all in one. Would you suggest as people learn this, they sort of do their creation and their shaping and their arrangement and get the fundamentals of the song there, and then sort of stop and then come back with the engineer mind?
No, that's how I feel like it was traditionally done.
Right.
And I would say now that my favorite music is coming from people that are both creative and engineers, and that they mix the two processes together throughout the whole process.
Right. It seems like Mr. Bill does that as too. Like by the time they're sort of done, it's like it's mixed and almost mastered.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like I wouldn't have said that like 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago, I would have been like, no, they're separate processes. But like now I feel like it's just.
Well, I guess I'm posing it in the as you're learning phase.
Yeah.
You don't have that. If you haven't got your engineer chops, do you try to separate it out, come back and just focus on that? I think what I see is people, you get distracted with the sound design or the sample selection. You go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah, for sure.
I try to coach people to say like, break your things up into phases so that you're doing a focused study, a focused practice on this skill set, so you can kind of hone in. And the research says that when you do focused practice on one thing, that's where you get the most gains, and you really can come back and learn from that.
Yeah. I'd say that there's definitely value to that. I feel like when I was learning though, I would, in the sense of like separating out my processes, I would overdo like the process sometimes. Like when I got to my mix down process, I would over mix the track, because I was like, I'm focusing on mixing, you know? And then like I would do all this unnecessary stuff, and it would just make the track sound not as good. But maybe everyone needs to go through those periods of time, because also there's definitely that phase that I've been through where I'm like trying to write a track, but then I get sidetracked by like EQing a snare or trying to get this thing to work. And oftentimes it's like you just got to keep on hitting your head against the wall. And really for me, I think the things that accelerated my learning and my understanding of things was dissecting other people's tracks and actively listening to individual parts of the track and monitoring and like treating it like a science, and not, yeah. And then it allowed my creativity to have the influence from the engineering side. Yeah.
Cool. Let's listen to this next one.
Okay. I don't know if this will work, honestly. Can you hear this? Hold on a second.
Yep.
Can you hear that?
Yep.
Okay, great. I won't be able to see this through Span, unfortunately, though. But I can tell you. Like that hi-hat right there, you can hear the reverb on it, and you can hear how much louder it is. Like I really like the bass sound design and the groove in this, but the sub bass is almost non-existent. Like I feel like again, being able to look at this through span would help out, because I feel like these were made on like Yamaha speakers or something. I feel like I can almost tell what monitors they're made on, like KRK Rocket or Yamaha.
And on the sound or on the mix side, sure. I like
What was that?
I like the groove. I like the feel. I like
Yeah.
the energy.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, but I could hear in there. It's harder to like give exact feedback since I don't have the track to be able to look through span. But you could hear in there that the hi-hats were like really loud and almost like too reverberant, and that's why I really recommend getting span, is that being able to compare your song. Like I feel like I could mix a song without hearing it, almost just by looking at span, and have it sound decently good. Obviously I wouldn't want to do that, but the thing that span allows you to do is, even if you have terrible monitors, you can listen to your favorite tracks and like see how they look in span, and then be able to listen to your own songs and be able to compare what you're hearing with what you're seeing. Because like when you're just listening, it's very easy to get lost because we're such visual creatures. I feel like having that extra sensory input really helps the information and decision process. I feel like this track, if the creator, if Wubbin was able to look at his favorite like G Jones tracks, I'm assuming he likes G Jones by the sound design. If he was able to look at his favorite tracks and see their levels and then compare it to his own, this track would sound so much better.
Well, awesome, man. Well, I think that's about it for tonight. Thank you so much for showing up, and we did record this. We'll see how it turns out, and we'll recap and drop links. Everybody check out AHEE's Gumroad for the racks and all the stuff that he's got going on his end. Check out his YouTube and subscribe to that. He's got some amazing tutorials. Download his EP from Gravitas and support his music on Spotify. And we'll have you back soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
last
Jesse.
words on your any last words on your end?
Stay creative. Always try to be learning something, even if it's not music. Just always be in a creative mode, and enjoy the process of making music. And also at the same time, know you'll never be satisfied.
Wise words.
And be okay with that, because at every level, everything from a beginner to the most advanced artists, like I've seen Amon Tobin come off of the main stage LIB where I thought he killed it, and I happened to talk to him and he was like, "Oh, I did so horrible." I'm like, whatever, man, so it's just at every level, and just be aware that you got to be okay with
I have a funny story about that. I got to see the Glitch Mob play a set at Austin City Limits.
Yeah.
And I mean, they played for like 40,000 people right before, I think it was Run the Jewels, or no, Outkast played after them.
Oh, wow.
They were on a big stage right next to the main stage. They came off the stage, they went to their bus, and it just so happened that Red Bull had filmed the set, and then so they restreamed the set after their set. So I watched the Glitch Mob guys watch themselves play on the Red Bull, and they did the same thing. They picked apart every part of it. Oh, I messed this part up, and I was watching this going like, okay, yeah, that was terrible. Yeah, yeah, like you said, you'll never be satisfied. Always be learning. Always stay hungry. And yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great night. Appreciate you.
Bye. Peace, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, aliens.